Today I want to talk a little bit about how to actually get the most out of yourself in the heat. In previous episodes, number one, we kind of talked about what happens to your body when you train or race in the heat. Number two, we talked about who gets affected most by the heat. And so today we want to talk about kind of how to overcome the heat, or more appropriately, deal with the heat, because we can't overcome it completely. So previously, a couple times I mentioned heat kind of acts like a governor, and whether it's heat that's created internally through muscle contraction or externally from the environment, both of those things will put a stop on our ability to continue to increase our intensity. So the number one thing I want to have out there when we're dealing with heat is to adjust your expectations as it relates to how hard or how fast you're going. So power or pace, look at those things and how they're going to be expressed in relation to that day, and not your perfect testing conditions at 68 degrees and 18% humidity and everything's controlled. Look at them and how they're going to be in relation to your performance for that day. If you try to go out and do the same power or the same running pace or the same swimming pace that you do in perfect conditions, you're going to blow up. You're going to have to slow down. So as soon as you know you're going to have to train or race in the heat, adjust those and put realistic parameters on what you can do in that given environment, whether it's 105 degrees in Tucson or 90 degrees in Washington D.C. with a humidity of 89%. Those two are going to affect you differently, but also in a similar way, in that you won't be able to perform the same way you do when it's 70 degrees and 30% humidity. So first, adjust those things, because everyone is going to have to adjust those things. Second, put in some time in the heat. You can adapt fairly quickly to hot environments. It takes about 7 days. Maybe as many as 12, depending on you, depending on your situation. The more time you spend in the heat, the quicker you'll adapt. The more, if you're only spending an hour in the heat and then 23 hours a day in air-conditioned environment, it's going to take a lot longer. So give yourself as much time as you can. But be smart about it too. Don't just go out and sit on the asphalt and dehydrate for 8 hours a day. Get out there for a little bit, spend some time out there, hydrate while you're exposing yourself to the heat. So you can train out in it at the hottest part of the day. You can do indoor training. Personally, I use my garage. It faces south. It gets pretty hot. There's no airflow. Can just sit on the rollers in there and get a good exposure for a couple hours a day. And then probably the least accessible way right now is through a sauna. Sauna, you need less time in there because it's hotter. You can crank it up to 100 and anywhere from 150 to 200 degrees, and spend 20 minutes in there a day, and you'll get a good adaptation. So, but given our current environment, less accessible, unless you have your own. 3 tricks to cool yourself. One, it's easier to cool yourself in a more arid environment. So we are cooled through evaporation. So if you're in a humid environment, water, sweat does not evaporate as readily. If you're in a more arid environment, it's easier to cool yourself. You notice your clothes don't feel wet because the sweat and water you might dump on yourself is evaporating quickly. So if you're in a more arid environment, just let yourself sweat as much as you can. Pour water on yourself. It doesn't even matter the temperature of the water. You can, like, air temperature water is fine. If you're in a more humid environment, now we have to get a little more specific. You have to kind of use cold water if you're dumping it on yourself. You have to try to get fluids that are as cold as possible into your core. So drinking in fluids that are as cold as possible. And that's going to be the best way to cool yourself in a hot, humid environment. I once took a slushy machine to a paracycling world championships in Greenville, South Carolina. I put it on a truck, drove it there so that we could have a slushy machine in that hot, humid environment. And I made electrolyte drink slushies for everyone. So getting something like that, freezing bottles overnight, freezing hydration bladders overnight, and then allowing them to slowly thaw out while you ride, and then drinking them, really excellent way to do that. And the frozen bladder also acts as like a cooling vest on you. That works pretty well in any environment. So keeping those fluids as cold as possible in hot, humid environments. And then dousing yourself, there's specific areas where you cool better. The back of your neck, low back, forearms, the backs of your hands, the fronts of your thighs. These areas all have a lot of blood flow close to the skin. They all, for the most part, especially forearms, hands, thighs, all get some airflow over them just through you moving. So that helps with evaporation. Back of your neck, low back, very specific to blood flow, and make sure those areas are cool, cold fluids, and that's for humid or arid environments. And anything that works in a humid environment will probably work in an arid environment, just because you're gonna have better evaporative cooling. So yeah, use those specific areas, but nothing takes the place of being adapted to it. Spending time out in the heat during your training and practice races. One thing I kind of skipped over till the end that I mentioned really early on was swim pacing. If you have to swim in warm water, you're just the only option you have, unless you're doing a long, like 10K swim. If you're doing any triathlon or training in open water that's shorter, your only option is to adjust your pace, because water is a better conductor of heat and temperature in general. you know, you don't have the option of taking in cold drinks. You don't have the option of like splashing yourself with colder water because you're submerged in it. So you just have to adjust your pace and hope that it's still faster than other people. So and you'll see those people who haven't adjusted their pace in warm water because they quickly go from way out front to way back. So that is quick down and dirty on how to perform better in the heat. If you guys have questions, let me know. So, be back soon with another topic. That was a good close.